The candles flicker against walls painted with saints' eyes, their wax dripping like silent confessions. You stand in a chamber that smells of iron and rosewater, where velvet curtains shut out the moon but cannot hush the whispers. Somewhere beyond, a child cries, a sound at once fragile and accusing, yet no one moves to comfort him. In the mirror before you, a crown gleams, heavy as judgment, and your own reflection trembles beneath its weight. To keep your throne, the priests have demanded purity, the courtiers an heir, but the heir has grown into a man, and the corridors have grown narrow, lined with rumor and threat. Tonight the door closes, the silk ties slip from your wrists, and power feels less like glory than like a noose. What would you do, they will ask centuries later, to keep a kingdom from tearing you apart? The smell of beeswax and incense clings to your childhood like a second skin, a soft haze of perfumed air that hides the rot beneath. You are 5 years old, a princess in a drafty castle where the stones sweat with winter and the nuns whisper prayers into your ears as they braid your hair. Each plait is a warning disguised as affection. Speak softly, bow lower, trust no one. Candles burn all night in the chapel, their flames throwing long fingers of light across the marble floor, and you lie awake listening to their hiss as if they were trying to tell you a secret. Outside, the wind claws at the shutters like a starving dog, but inside every surface is polished and cold. Silver chalices, gilt-framed icons, polished floors, objects of devotion that will one day become instruments of control. They dress you in white silk so stiff it cuts into your shoulders, and when you stand before the mirror, you do not recognize the small girl staring back. Her eyes already learning to hide, her mouth rehearsing smiles. The priests tell you God has chosen you for greatness. Your governess warns that greatness is a hunger that devours the weak. You memorize their words like scripture, yet feel a strange hollowness beneath them. A quiet place where your own voice cannot echo. At night, when you sneak to the window and press your palm to the glass, you smell wet earth and stable hay from the courtyards below. Sense of a freer world you may never touch again. In this chamber of velvet and stone, innocence feels less like a gift than a fragile bird you are expected to keep caged forever, even as its wings beat against your ribs. The years slide past like candle wax, slow and inevitable, and the small princess becomes a young bride, groomed for a throne she has never seen beyond tapestries. The day they betroth you, the chapel bells toll not in celebration, but like a warning deep in your ribs. You are led through corridors that smell of myrrh and damp limestone. The echo of your slip is a child's heartbeat trying to keep pace with destiny. The court ladies murmur behind their fans, gauze over sharpened teeth, as they pinch your sleeves. Straighten your crown, press instructions into your palms disguised as rosaries. Smile at him. Bear sons, never let your eyes betray fear. The man who will be your husband is twice your age, perfumed with cloven steel, his hand heavy on your shoulder like a verdict. When he speaks, his words are honeyed, but his breath tastes of iron. Even your wedding veil cannot mask it. In public, you become a living reliquary, paraded beneath stained glass and silk canopies, a vessel for dynastic hopes. In private, you are a novice in a ritual without scripture, learning how to fold yourself into silence as the chamber doors close behind you. At night, you lie on linen embroidered with lilies, staring at the ceiling's painted saints whose eyes never blink, and you wonder whether they see or judge. Outside, the city roars with festival drums, but in your rooms, the only sound is the crack of the fireplace and your own shallow breathing. Somewhere beyond these walls, your son will one day be born, but tonight you are only a girl memorizing the taste of fear, learning to braid it into your hair with the pearls. The crown you once imagined as a halo now feels like a weight sewn into your skull, pressing down each time you bow. By the time your first winter as queen arrives, the palace no longer feels like a home but a maze of listening walls. The corridors smell of damp velvet and old incense. Every footfall you make is answered by an echo that seems not your own. Servants glide like ghosts, heads bowed, eyes lowered, yet you sense their glances flicker after you as you pass. In the audience hall, you sit beneath tapestries of long-dead monarchs, their woven eyes fixed upon you as if measuring your worth. Each ritual of power is another performance, signing decrees with a quill so heavy it bruises your fingers, smiling at courtiers whose hands tremble with concealed daggers, reciting blessings in a voice that no longer sounds like yours. When the king travels for war, you are left as regent, and the throne room becomes both stage and trap. Petitioners kneel, priests chant, candles hiss, but beneath their words you hear only a low tide of expectation, that you produce heirs, that you embody virtue, that you remain unassailable even as you are alone. At night you slip from your chambers to walk the cloisters, trailing your fingers along the cold stone until you reach the chapel. There, before an altar dark with soot, you kneel in silence, not praying, but listening to your own heartbeat like a muffled drum. Beyond the stained glass windows the city sleeps under snow, roofs glowing faintly with frost. a world you once longed to touch now sealed away by walls and protocol. In that hush, you feel the first tremor of a thought you dare not name. That your survival here will demand more than obedience. That innocence itself is a liability to be shed like an old skin. And as the candles gutter and a single wax tear slides down its taper, you realize how quickly a child's halo can harden into a crown of thorns. The boy arrives on a storm-blue dawn, his first cry rising like a falcon's scream above the bells that toll for your labor. The birthing room reeks of iron and crushed lavender. Midwives scuttle like shadows, hands red to the wrists, whispering prayers into their palms as they pass him to you. He is impossibly small, yet already heavier than the crown you wear. You press him to your breast and smell milk, sweat, and new life, but also a faint thread of fear. In this palace, a son is not simply a child. He is a token, a weapon, a future claim. Outside the walls, the people cheer for an heir. Inside the walls, courtiers begin their calculations. By the time he can walk, the corridors echo with his laughter and with the rustle of spies. Tutors, priests, and envoys crowd his nursery under the guise of devotion, each planting their own seeds of loyalty. You watch him from the doorway, a figure of silk and quiet vigilance, while rumors coil like incense through the hallways about your influence over him, about the king's absence, about a mother who might wield a child like a blade. Even the nannies bow too low, eyes averted too quickly. You learn to weigh every glance, every compliment, as if it were a coin on a scale. In the evenings, when you rock him to sleep and his hair smells of sun and beeswax, you whisper stories from your own lost childhood, hoping to build a secret world between you before the court can colonize his mind. Yet in the candlelight, you glimpse his eyes flicker open, already wary, already measuring, as though he, too, senses the trap tightening around you both. By the time your son can recite Latin prayers and handle a dagger without trembling, the palace has become an echo chamber of his name. Servants repeat it with reverence. Scribes illuminate it in gold. And yet behind their lowered lashes, you sense another kind of worship. One that belongs not to him, but to the idea of succession. The king is away again, chasing wars at the edge of the map, and every absence stretches like a crack through the marble floors. In those cracks, the courtiers plant their games. They summon your son to private audiences under the pretext of tutoring. They load him with gifts heavy enough to tilt his small shoulders. They fill his ears with parables about loyalty, obedience, and the treachery of mothers. You watch the transformation as if through a sheet of frosted glass, his voice deepening, his questions turning into rehearsed phrases, his hugs becoming formal gestures. At banquets, he sits at the far end of the table where the priests can murmur into his ear, and when he glances at you across the candles, his expression is already guarded, a miniature mirror of the men surrounding him. The smell of spiced wine and tallow hangs over every feast, but beneath it is the scent of something colder, ambition fermenting like rot. At night, you send the nurses away and try to braid his hair as you once did. But your fingers tremble. Each plait feels like a prayer knotted too late. In the hush of the nursery, you whisper to him of rivers and forests beyond the walls, of freedom, of trust, and he listens with eyes half closed, saying nothing. In the flicker of the hearth, you catch the faintest shadow of a smirk, whether born of courtly lessons or the first flicker of rebellion, you cannot tell. The day the king's body is carried back through the palace gates, wrapped in battle-stained banners, the air smells of rain and burning wax. Bells toll again, but now their sound is dull, as if the metal itself has gone tired. Your son stands beside you at the balcony, no longer a boy, but not yet a man, his jaw set in the same hard line that once pressed upon your shoulder. Below, the courtiers bow, and you see their eyes lift one by one, not to mourn, but to measure. They have already begun the quiet pivot from king to heir, and you feel the shift in the room like a draught that snuffs a candle. In the following days, priests descend with counsel, nobles with offers, each weaving themselves closer around your son like vines choking a pillar. They speak of coronation rites, of alliances, of advising, until he reaches his majority. Yet every phrase is a blade disguised as a benediction. You try to hold his gaze across the council table, but he looks through you now, repeating their phrases in his new, deeper voice. Nights find you alone in the Queen's apartments. The scent of his childhood. Milk, beeswax, sun, replaced by ink, musk, and cold parchment. You walk the same corridors you once carried him down in your arms, and the echoes now sound like accusations. In a last, desperate attempt, you arrange a private supper with him. The room glows with candlelight, your hands trembling as you pour the wine, but his eyes remain distant, glinting with a knowledge you cannot read. When he finally speaks, it is with the careful courtesy of a stranger. You realize then that the court has not simply stolen your son's loyalty. It has rewritten the space between you, turning your motherhood into an arena where power and love cannot coexist. And as the candles burn lower, their wax pooling like pale blood on the table, you understand that to keep both your throne and your child, you will soon be forced to cross a line from which there is no return. The palace has grown quieter but more dangerous, like a theatre after the overture when every performer waits in shadow. With the king dead, and your son still not yet crowned in his own right, you govern in a limbo of velvet and iron. Letters arrive sealed with unfamiliar crests, their wax smelling of foreign resins, each one a veiled threat or promise. In the council chamber, nobles speak over you with polite smiles. Priests quote scripture as if it were law, and every decision you make is weighed not by its merit, but by how quickly it might unseat you. At night, you sit alone in your apartments, the curtains drawn tight against the moon, and listen to the walls whisper. Somewhere beyond them, your son moves through the corridors like a visitor, slipping from one tutor to another, gathering his own court from your enemy's sons. Rumors rise like damp from the stones, that he is impatient for full power, that you cling to your regency, that you have bewitched him, that you will not let him go. You can feel the trap closing, the scent of incense in the chapel suddenly acrid, the caress of silk on your wrists suddenly like binding. Even your most trusted ladies exchange glances behind your back. In the hush of your private chapel, beneath a crucifix darkened by centuries of candle smoke, you kneel not in prayer, but in calculation. The only shield left between you and obliteration is the bond you still share with your son, frayed though it is. You imagine him as he once was, a child asleep against your shoulder, breathing the scent of your hair. Now, his hair smells of ink and steel, and he has learned to keep his thoughts locked behind a smile. To survive, you tell yourself, you must find a way to pull him back toward you, even if the gesture itself begins to look like sin. The corridors that once rang with your son's laughter now hum with the rustle of schemes. Courtiers drift through them like candle smoke, leaving behind whispers that cling to the walls. Some say you are losing your grip, others that you will do anything to keep it. In public, you perform serenity, gliding through the chapel with eyes lowered, blessing the poor, signing decrees with a steady hand. But in private, you feel the tremor building, a storm pressed against stained glass. Your son sits at council now, his presence like a blade laid across the table. He no longer seeks your advice. Instead, he tests you with questions shaped by other tongues, his answers laced with the chill of the men who have groomed him. Yet there are moments, brief as candle flickers, when his glance softens and you glimpse the boy you once held. Moments that ignite a dangerous hope. You begin arranging more private audiences, inventing excuses to draw him back into your orbit. A disputed treaty, a sick vassal, the reorganization of the royal chapel. Each conversation is a negotiation veiled as instruction. Each gesture an attempt to re-thread the bond between mother and heir before it snaps entirely. Outside, storms batter the coast. Inside, the palace breathes with a different weather, one of suspicion, envy, and hunger. At night, alone in your apartments, you run your hands across the heavy brocade of your sleeves and feel it as a kind of armor. You tell yourself there must still be a path to survival, a way to keep both your crown and your child without surrendering your soul. But even as you plan, the scent of wax and iron fills the air, a reminder that in this place, mercy is a story told to children, and strategy is the only prayer that still works. Winter settles over the palace like a shroud, snow muffling the courtyard so completely that every footstep feels like a trespass. Inside, the air grows heavy with perfumed smoke from endless vigils and the low drone of priests who speak your name with piety in public and venom in private. Your son now moves through the great hall with a retinue of his own. Young nobles, clerics, foreign advisors, men whose smiles never reach their eyes. Each council session feels like a slow tightening of a net. Even your servants hesitate before bringing you letters, as though the parchment might explode in their hands. You have tried kindness, you have tried reason, but each approach only seems to harden him further. One night, you summon him under the pretext of a private mass. The chapel is lit by dozens of candles whose flames sway in unison, casting your two shadows into one on the cold stone floor. You speak to him of loyalty, of legacy, of the storms gathering beyond the borders, but your words fall into silence like snow into a well. He looks at you not as a son, but as a sovereign assessing a rival. In that moment, you understand the trap is complete. The boy you raised has become a man forged by your enemies, and the bond you thought would save you is now the very weapon poised above your throat. As the last candle gutters and the smell of melting wax thickens in your lungs, you realize there is no longer a clear line between power and survival, only a dark corridor with no doors left open. Somewhere beyond it, a decision waits, one that will mark you forever. Yet still you stand very still, palms pressed together, feeling the stone chill seep into your skin like the touch of a crown you cannot remove. The first day of his reign dawns beneath a sky the color of lead, the city below wrapped in mist that smells of wet stone and smoke. Bells toll again, but this time not for a birth or a death. They toll for a coronation that does not include you. From a high window you watch the procession coil through the streets, trumpets, banners, the hiss of torches, your son at its center like a jewel set in a crown of knives. Inside the palace, your apartments have been moved to a smaller wing, your guards replaced by men you do not know. Even the tapestries have changed. Scenes of battle and conquest now where once there were saints and mothers. The council no longer consults you, though polite invitations still arrive for ceremonies where your presence is ornamental, a living relic. At night the corridors echo with a new music, clinking armor, foreign accents, the laughter of young men who believe history belongs to them. In the silence of your chamber, you light a single candle and breathe in its scent of honey and smoke, a faint echo of the nursery where you once rocked him. You think of all the warnings braided into your hair as a girl, of every moment you chose survival over truth. Now survival itself feels like a hollow room with the windows nailed shut. Yet even in that hollowness, something stirs. A quiet knowledge that legends are written not only by the victors, but also by the fallen who outlast the whispering of their enemies. You straighten your spine, adjusting the weight of a crown that is no longer yours but still imprints its cold circle into your skull, and listen to the city's cheers rising like a tide that will either drown you or carry you somewhere you cannot yet see. The days after the coronation unfold like a slow eclipse. Sunlight still spills into the palace courtyards, but it feels pale, drained of warmth, as if even the sky has chosen a side. You move through your reduced apartments like a ghost, touching the cool stone walls as though they might remember you when everyone else has forgotten. Courtiers who once bent low now offer only shallow bows. Their eyes slide away, eager to attach themselves to fresher power. In council sessions, you are invited only to sit silently behind a lattice screen. Your words requested for ritual, but ignored in practice. Yet you listen, and in listening you begin to see how fragile this new regime is, built on youthful arrogance and borrowed loyalties. At night, alone with your candle, you sift through letters hidden beneath the floorboards, dispatches from allies you nurtured years ago, fragments of leverage still within your grasp. The wax drips down your fingers as you hold the flame close, reading by its tremor. You think of your son, of the boy who once curled against you in sleep, and feel both ache and iron coiling inside your chest. They have made you a relic, but relics can also be talismans. They can outlast those who defile them. Beyond your window, the city mutters under curfew, unrest beginning to stir like a tide before a storm. You inhale the night air, its smell of rain and ashes mixing with the faint scent of beeswax on your sleeves. And for the first time in years, you sense not just loss, but possibility. It is dangerous, this flicker of agency, yet it steadies your hands. The crown may be gone, but the knowledge carved into you by survival remains, as sharp as ever, waiting for the moment when silence can be turned into power again. Spring returns muted, the palace gardens blooming without fragrance, as though the earth itself fears to draw attention. From your window, you watch your son walk among the hedges with his advisors, their heads bent close, the glint of steel at their hips catching the sun. He no longer looks up to your balcony. You are no longer meant to be seen. Yet within the hush of your apartments you have begun to write. At first only prayers, then memories, then secrets disguised as parables. You burn some pages, hide others in reliquaries. A chronicle whispered into the future so that someday someone will know how the story truly unfolded. The court believes you finished, a portrait fading in a forgotten gallery. But each time you dip the quill into ink, you feel a pulse of quiet defiance. You recall the girl in stiff white silk, the young bride beneath painted saints, the mother at a balcony, and realize that all along you have been rehearsing this moment. The turning of silence into legacy. Outside, discontent stirs in the streets. Famine gnaws at the edges of your son's glory. Foreign allies waver. You hear it in the shuffle of guards' boots, the nervous cough of priests, the clatter of chains being moved from one cell to another. You may never regain a throne, but you can plant an echo that will outlast crowns. As you press your seal into warm wax one last time, the candle gutters and the smell of honeyed smoke fills the room. You close your eyes, feeling the circle of its heat on your skin like a crown you forged for yourself. For a moment, the sound of distant bells rises through the window, and you are not a prisoner, but a witness, watching history shift, knowing that in some secret way you have already begun to outlive it. The candle of her life burns low, yet its scent lingers far beyond the stone of her prison. History rarely remembers queens who were silenced, but fragments of her letters, her portraits with their haunted eyes, and rumors of the child king, who feared his own mother have drifted down the centuries like smoke. They whisper of a girl promised a crown, given a wedding that wasn't, a coronation of silence, and a throne of ashes. And so, even in erasure, she reshaped the story. No longer just a victim, but a mirror held up to the brutal machinery of royalty itself. It is in these cracks of forgotten power that we glimpse the true cost of dynasties, not the splendor of coronations, but the quiet rooms where power crushes its own. If this hidden chapter of royal history unsettled you, imagine how many more remain buried. Subscribe and turn on notifications to walk with us through more of these dark corridors of the past, where crowns gleam but shadows rule, and forgotten voices still have something to say.